There we go.
All right, I think I'm in
Two
there.
side by sides.
Yeah, but why won't it let me use my face?
Um.
Oh, I see. I don't have enough followers to go with my face.
Oh, seriously? I didn't know
Uh,
you had to have a certain amount of followers to show your face.
Neither did I till just now.
Oh, oh no. Well, I mean, at least we can hear you.
And now my computer's picking it up. Anyway, yeah, well, here we go. Let's talk.
All right. So, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm all right. It's been an interesting week here in the United States, but I'm here, and I'm so excited to talk to you.
Same here. I've been loving your videos. That one video that you did on me, that was so awesome. Thank you.
Oh, of course. I mean, this series is so awesome. I have definitely been enjoying watching some of the other conversations you've had, and it's just really cool because you've said many times writing is such a solitary activity, and then when I joined Book Talk, it's been so nice to just find people who like to talk about the same things I do and are interested. So it's really awesome.
Yeah. So, tell us about your book.
Oh, yeah, I'm the worst at this, apparently. I'm so bad, I forgot to put a synopsis on the book itself when I published it. uh, so I, like any number of people, the pandemic definitely made some changes in my mind and my life. I had to embark on some cardiovascular exercise, and without the gym, it was a really interesting journey. But one of the things I did to make it less awful was tell myself a story while I was out walking and huffing and puffing in the streets. So that story was about a girl who gets a message from a long lost father. She was raised as an orphan. And so as she gets this message, she comes to understand that she's not just some ordinary girl. She's actually at the center of a very long and dangerous web of intrigue. So it's a little Hunger Games, a little Ready Player One in terms of life turns upside down and you start to see that the world around you isn't quite what you thought. And Clementine Jones has to struggle to try to figure out what the truth is, and all without getting in any trouble.
Cool. So is it so does it take place on Earth, or is it like your own world that you made?
Yeah, it's it's definitely Earth-ish. It is not meant to be Earth. I use different units of measurement and time to try to set it apart, but they are humanoid. I mean, we don't have a different species or anything like that. And for all intents and purposes, it is an Earth-like planet. But I started trying to set it very deliberately in our world in some sort of future. And I found that the amount of research to make the kind of story connections I wanted to have happen between past and future is going to be really hard to get the groundwork for present day to make that trajectory leap. So it was a lot easier to set it in a world that is, loosely based or might be 1,000 years in the future in this world.
So we just don't know. It's something.
Yeah, exactly. It's place names that may sound familiar, and a year is called a solaris, and a day is called a sol, and a month is called a lunaris. So I used kind of Latin roots to make it feel familiar enough that you weren't totally confused, but distinct enough that you're like, I am definitely not at home.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that sounds really cool.
Hold on 1 second. This is so strange, but I just got a message. So let's re-say this to everybody. Hello to my husband who's watching the live, and I'm not on camera because I don't have enough followers yet.
Oh, hi.
TikTok, so cruel. So anybody who's watching, please go out and tell people to follow me so that next time you can see my shining face and my incredible collection of Funko Pops that would have been behind me.
You would think that I could see them not letting you do your own live, but if you're on somebody else's, you would think that they would let you.
Yeah. I mean, they let me show my face in all them videos. It's not like it's going to be a surprise to y'all.
Yeah.
So tell me, if I had used your world building notebook, how might I have had better responses to those questions?
Oh, well, thanks for letting me show my book off. That's a good question. Um, I mean, as far as the world building stuff goes, I have several pages where it asks you the name of the world, what all the continents and countries are, and everybody hates talking about their own stuff, right?
I know. Which is why, like, in my interview, I'm like, please, you tell me about you now.
And then I put like, tell us where the main character lives in these places and what is the countries and cities that are actually relevant to the story, because every single one of them on the continent can't be relative to the, or on the planet can't be relative to the story, right?
For sure.
And then all of the flora and fauna, if it's different than Earth's. I
Yep.
always give blank pages after every like point so that you can scribble additional notes if something in here didn't cover it all. And I have like stuff about the magic, how it works, what are the downfalls of it, what does it feel like to the character, and who can use it, and just all that type of stuff.
I love it. I love it.
Infrastructure and architecture of this, of the main civilization that's.
Yeah. No, I spent so much time thinking through so many of these things. So I definitely see how that's a great tool. It's funny that some of them I'm like, someone else had asked me about, animals and wildlife and stuff. And it was one element I never gave any thought to, because a lot of what I was setting up is, so in Clementine's world, she is a citizen of the Southern Conglomerate, which is a combination of the government and a corporation. So everybody works for the government, and the government provides all of your food and housing and entertainment and all of that. So it's this sort of insular ecosystem of the conglomerate society, and that's what Clem starts to see through and around. And eventually it's gonna, have some big challenges with.
Okay. I've figured out on these lives that I'm awkward, and when people say something, I sometimes don't have a response back to it. I'm sorry.
Nothing wrong with that. No, I mean, believe me, I can talk about this book forever because I spent way too long thinking about it. And once it was out of my head, I was so relieved to have it out of my head and into the world. And I thought, oh, the world will take care of it from here. But it turns out I got to help the world hear about it.
Yeah, see, like you're stuck in the office writing your book for forever. You're all by yourself, and then suddenly, when you publish it, you have to become a celebrity.
I know. Well, and people, respectfully, they want to know what the book's about. And I'm like, well, there's one way you can find out. It's a really great way that you can find out what the book is about.
Read it.
Yeah, buy a copy and read it. Well, tell me what happens. Yeah, I would. I did. I wrote it all down. That's why I put it in a book. Otherwise, I'd be sitting here talking to you for a long time.
Yeah, I told you exactly what everything happens in the book silently on a piece of paper so that I would not have to talk to you.
Right. Bear in mind, I got real confused while I was doing it too. It took me a long time. So if I try to explain it to you, I will probably get tripped up. I commented on somebody had a video the other day that was talking about how do you come up with character names, and I'm pretty sure that in the draft for my second book, I actually created an additional supporting character because I forgot to change the name in a couple of places where the character speaks, and all of a sudden I was rereading it and I was like, oh, there's two of them now. I actually don't hate that. Huh.
I just won't introduce this character. All of a sudden, they're just going to start talking.
They're just going to start talking, and then, yeah, oddly enough, they physically look a lot like the other person that's there, but they're not. They're not them.
Okay, so I'm just going to start going into my questions.
Yeah.
Here. So, other than your own, what is your favorite book?
I mean, that is like the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? Like, can you pick only one? The one that always bubbles to the top for me is Deborah Harkness's A Discovery of Witches. It kicks off an insanely good trilogy of books. She's actually now gone back and is starting to do, it looks like, another trilogy after a standalone. And she has such an incredible grasp on history. She is a historian, and she is able to use elements of the history that we as humans know to actually narrate and show that there's this hidden society of witches and vampires and demons that have been living among us ever since they were forced into hiding. And so it's really interesting to look at, historical events around, like, say, the Enlightenment, and think that some of those enlightened figures were witches and vampires that got a little too famous among the humans, as opposed to just exceptional humans like we all have been taught to think. And so it's just such an interesting way to look back at history. And the main character in that story is a historian. So, of course, it's all so exciting to her to get to know people who might have met Charles Darwin and Shakespeare. And I would love to be one of those people who got to meet those, So, yeah, so the Discovery of Witches and then the subsequent 2 books in the All Souls trilogy, I reread them every couple years, even though they're very, very long.
I do that with my favorite books too. I just wrote it down because I'm going to check that out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, highly recommend. There is a TV adaptation. As with anything, it's different. It is also wonderful. It is different.
Okay. Who did you say the author was?
Deborah Harkness.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll probably do another video about it now that I'm talking about it. That is the one fun thing about being on TikTok, is I have also found, like, unlike writing, where I spent months going over it and thinking about it and improving it and making it better, TikTok is not a place for that. TikTok is a place for, like, hey, I just had this one thought. Okay, bye.
Yeah.
And it's so different from, I had this one thought and I want to make it, as good as it can be. And I have all these other thoughts that tie together. Nah, I just made a cup of tea and posted it on the internet. All right.
I actually was just watching that before I...
It's calming. It's calming.
I used to have this really pretty teapot that I got off of Fabulous. There was like a box subscription,
Yeah.
something like that. I don't remember what it was called, but it was this pretty blue teapot with like flowers all over it, and
Aww.
I'm upset.
I don't blame you. Have you ever heard, I am not going to remember the name, but the Japanese concept of making things more beautiful once they have been broken. So
Where they put the gold.
like they put gold in the glue. I like, okay, you told me you broke this beautiful thing, and my first response is like, oh, you could have done this. Whereas every time I've broken something, I don't think of that either. But I love that idea. I wish I remembered it before, but yeah, that's
I wouldn't
sad.
have the patience to sit there and like get all the little bitty pieces. And...
Yeah, there is that. Oh yeah.
Okay, so when did you first realize that you wanted to be an author?
When indeed. I probably. I've wanted to be a writer for a long time. I have been a writer all my life. I just haven't been writing. I've had a couple of different careers, and one of them was in the theater. And when I retired from the theater, I was like, all right, I'm going to write plays. And I did. I wrote some plays, and I tried that angle for a while. Ultimately, just wasn't the direction I wanted to go, and my life took a different direction. But then I'd been thinking about this story, and again, this was just a distraction to keep me from not turning around and going home and sitting on the couch instead of continuing to walk. And I kept saying like, I could never do anything with it. Oh no, I can't write a book. That's something other people do. And then I went to the Tower of London. I know, such privilege, but we were on a holiday trip, and and as we were walking up, the guard who was taking tickets just looked at me and said, "It's high time you wrote that book you've been thinking about." And I don't know what it was about that moment, but I was like, all right, well, if he says so, like, I've known I wanted to do this, and I turns out I'm perfectly capable of doing so. It just, I needed someone else to convince me. And, I have support at home. I have support of friends and family, but there was something about just that external moment of like serendipity in the world.
Such an interesting thing for just some random guard to say to somebody.
I know. Well, and I mean, I posted a video about it because like there's not an insignificant part of me that's like, it'd be really cool to find him someday and be like, you probably don't know that you did this, but you gave me permission to do something I'd been wanting to do. And I would just like to say thanks for using your position and energy to, encourage other people. Because he could have just as easily been like, get in, like no pictures, like
or something. But
yeah, exactly, or just hello. But no, it was eye contact, and it was a thing that he said specifically to me. Now, he could have no idea that was the exact right phrase to unlock something in my head, but
Of course not.
You never know when it's gonna strike, so there you go.
It was like that. I told you that. My voice there. The sugar packet that I told you that I at a restaurant. It was like it said, "For now, get inspired and write your book." I was like, "Okay, fine, I will."
Yeah, exactly. We can do it. Yes.
So, and when did you say that was? It was just like a couple years ago?
Yeah. That was January of 2023. And then the book came out in August of this year. I took a long time with it because, again, at first I was just, when I sat down, I wasn't trying to write a book I was going to publish. I just said, okay, let's spend some time writing. You've got free time on the weekends. If you want to try it, you want to try it. I tried other things too. I ran an Etsy shop for a hot minute. I was like, because my New Year's resolution in 2023 was to try to create more than I consumed. And that just meant, if I was going to be watching lots of television and reading lots of books and listening to other people's music and podcasts, then I was also going to try to create something. And so I made some art and tried to sell that. And then ultimately writing was the thing that I kept doing and had more fun with. And, this story turned out, I think, very, very well. So once it started clicking, then I started having conversations with my husband about like, okay, well, maybe I want to look at working with a developmental editor, because I didn't get a degree in writing, and I haven't had someone give me some critiques on style and things that, an editor is very good at. And so I'm super glad I did that because, you were asking me earlier about world building, and on my website, there is a blog post that was once most of a chapter in this book, and it is the driest, most awful world building history chapter that I felt compelled to put in the book because I needed to know all of that information. But as the editor pointed out, she was like, you don't want to pin your readers down in chapter 2 and make them read this awful, boring thing just so that they can understand the rest of the book. You need to take the pieces of it and put them in places where it makes sense. But you also don't have to give us the names of all of the people and all of the stuff that I had worked out, because it is important in how the world functions, but it isn't necessarily important that the reader knows it then.
Yeah, learning when to sprinkle it in is a
yeah, I'll let you know when I'm done learning that.
It's a skill that you need to cultivate. I think.
Yeah.
Like, I need you to know all of this.
Right. Well, and there's a certain amount of, and as a writer, that you've done a video on show, don't tell. And it's a very hard line to walk, because there are some things that you do need to tell. And there are some things that definitely you have to show. Really funny. Yeah. So
I'm sure it's fine, Ari. I'm sure it's not that weak.
no, it's not. I mean, that's also for me why I was like, I'm gonna make this Earth-ish so that I don't have to rebuild everything. Because I figure people they still eat using their mouths and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, something that drastically different would be super hard to convey to readers.
Right. Well, and that was also why I made the choices that I made in terms of trying to, keep it grounded but not rooted, so that I didn't have to, totally spend all of my time explaining just, basics of how the world operates. But yeah, it's weird. You as the writer have to know some of those things. Some of them you're never going to tell your readers. You just know them.
So, since it's Earth-ish, I'm sorry if it's so echoey in here.
You're fine. I'm having a blast.
I'm in like a huge basement with concrete walls, so it echoes so bad. I try not to talk too loud so it doesn't echo so bad.
No, it's not bad at all.
Okay. But so since your world is Earth-ish, I'm guessing you didn't have to do a whole lot of like research for the places where things are going to be. Did you make yourself like a little map so you kept track of where things are, or?
Yes, definitely. There are some maps in the text itself. That was some feedback I got from an early reader, was just because it was definitely not our world. They were like, it would be helpful to have just a little reference point geography. So in the text, at the beginning, there's a map of where the character grew up and her immediate surroundings. And then closer to the end, there's a map of the whole territory of the country. And yeah, going back for my second book, I was like, oh, I put that there. Oh, I really wish I hadn't, but
It's in stone now.
yeah. But that's where you do the creative. Okay, so maybe this will happen. Yeah.
Yeah. I never thought about doing like more than one map. Usually there's one like at the beginning of a book,
Right.
but you
Right.
have another place
Yeah.
further in, just do another one. I never thought about that.
Well, the originally what I was going to do is there are 5 parts in the book because I am a theatrical person, so 5-act structure always resonates with me. But I was going to actually in each part of the book have the map getting slowly larger and larger, because it's sort of the character going from her small insular to seeing the whole of the society around her. But I felt by the end that the few maps in the middle weren't giving you that much difference, and they were only sort of making you go like, what? So I just felt that the small to large as the book ending statement was going to be okay. But yeah, I know a couple people have said like the maps make a difference.
Yeah, I need to start working on one from my book. I've tried. Have you seen people that do the rice thing where they like drop a bunch of rice on a piece of paper and then they like outline around the rice, and that's the shape.
The map? Oh no, I hadn't heard that.
Because it's like a way to just come up with how your continents and everything actually look.
Yeah, well, just get an Etch-a-Sketch and then like do the, sit there and do the twist for a while and see what happens.
It'll be like a million little tiny islands everywhere.
Yeah, right. My book about an archipelago.
Yeah. I bet it is overwhelming, Ari. I tried for a little bit. I did the little rice thing, and then I just threw it away.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that the closer to where the character is from, the more accurate the map is, the further reaches of the empire. It's like, Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking maybe in a later book we'll have somebody who goes there, but we're not sure.
My brain went blank.
Well, you're fine. One of the questions that you asked that I'm interested in talking about, just because I've heard other people on talking with you about it, is sort of like, what's your writing ritual? And because it's one of those things where I feel like I'm doing it wrong, even though there's no wrong way to do it, because at the end I still wrote things down. But for me, I generally will sit and write for about an hour and a half straight. And then and that's usually a chapter-ish. And when I say chapter-ish, I'm talking like first draft stuff, where it's just, as many words as you can get in the basket and just go, go, go. And I don't really try to stop and double back. And so those are like, filling the bucket sections. And then once I have a few chapters, or maybe a part of the book, then I will maybe go back and reread that. Because the thing I found writing the first book was certainly, by the time I got to the end, there were some details from the beginning that were no longer the same, just because of how the end had to work. And that structure playing, that was something I felt a lot more strong doing with my second book, which I am expecting back from the developmental editor next week. So I'm super excited to get back into working on that one. But I had such a different experience structuring it this time, because I had done that bit of the puzzling before.
So the part that you think that you're doing wrong is that you write for an hour straight?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's just like, I hear people talk about like, oh, I do, 20-minute writing sprints, and then I get up and I'm like, oh, see, I like sit until my watch tells me I'm getting blood clots. And then I'm like, oh, okay, it's time to stand up. Got it.
So when I actually sit and write on a consistent schedule, which has not been for a while, I need to get back into it. But when I do, I sit and write for like 4 or 5 hours straight until it's like 4 a.m. and I'm like, crap, I need to go to bed.
I love that. Well, I know that you have more freedom and latitude in your schedule to allow for like when you can do some of those things. Because trying to find the time around work has been an interesting challenge. Especially when the story takes over your brain, because like there are definitely days where I would love to stay up until 4 a.m. finishing something. Oh.
Yeah, I realize that I am squandering my free time. I have so much free time that I should have written 4 or 5 books by now, but I don't.
Should have. What's a should have?
I need to have discipline. I need to sit down, because it's something that you want to do. I want to have a book. I want a physical book that I wrote.
Yes.
And so I need to make that happen, and I'm not doing it.
No, wait. I'm sorry. Turn around and pick up the book on the shelf that has your name on it, Michelle.
Okay, I didn't actually write that though. I designed it and I came up with questions and stuff, but it's not a book.
No, I do not. I do not agree. It is a physical book, and your name is on the cover, and you put a lot of thought and planning. You picked what order you were going to talk about the topics. You came up with creative questions and ways to help others get inside their head. Don't sell yourself short. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of them. They're beautiful. And they have helped me. I made these for me to make books, and they have helped me.
Good.
A novel. How about that? A novel.
There it is. Yes. All right. Good. Well, yeah. And, it'll come. It will. I wanted one for a long time, and it wasn't until I went to the Tower of London that it actually came out. So, yeah.
As soon as I get through some of these interviews, because I've booked so many of these.
Yeah.
So many people respond to that video.
Good. I'm sorry I promoted you.
It's fine. I'm enjoying doing these. I really am. And
Again, the series has been a blast, and I was so excited to get to be one.
yeah, it's really like I'm loving talking to other authors, and it's actually getting me more motivated to actually be one. So it's helping. Just as soon as I get through them, then I'll have more time to actually sit and write.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, just from my own experience, and I'm not that much further along the road. The thing that, and I know that it isn't actually his words, but I heard it from him. I heard Tyler Perry talking about the idea of writing a first draft is you are putting as much sand in the bucket so that when you go to shape the castle, it can withstand the scraping and the shaping that you have to do to turn that mound of sand into a castle. And so often we will start out trying to build the tower because that's the coolest, prettiest, fanciest part of the castle. But it has to have an entire castle underneath it to stand on. And so something that I got better at as I was writing was letting the judgmental part of me just leave the room while I was writing, because that editorial voice will always be there. But that was the thing that was holding me back from just setting free and figuring out what I could put on the page. Because then, again, you don't make the castle in one sitting.
Yeah, that was actually one of my questions was like when you're writing, are you a big perfectionist or do you have to perfect it later? Because my issue is I'm a perfectionist as I'm writing the first draft and I need to stop it.
Yes. Well, my book is out in the world and there are still things I would like to change. So you're never going to get past that impulse. And I sat and I tweaked single words over and over. And by the time I changed the same one back and forth, like several times, I was like, okay, what are you doing? So I totally know that prohibitive feeling that you get of, well, if it isn't right, I don't want to move on. And that's where like the lesson of TikTok comes in. The videos that you spend hours editing don't go anywhere. And the ones that you might do off the cuff, bam. Yeah. So like, don't worry so much about that perfectionism, because if you don't get past the one point that you're at, that sentence is as perfect as it's going to get. And you're going to be a better writer when you write the next one.
That, and I always not always, but sometimes forget what I was going to write next after that. Because I spent so much time perfecting this, I done forgot what I was going to write after. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So sometimes, and I again, the difference of writing my first versus my second, night and day. Because when I sat down to write my first, I was still combating with the fact that I had never done it before. Mm-hmm. So every choice I was making, it was the first time I was making that kind of choice, and I didn't know, and I didn't have a sense. And I was like, will someone tell me what the right answer is? There isn't one. There's never going to be. And so like, by the time I sat down to write the second one, I was like, okay, so what I put on the page today might not make it to the end of this journey and be part of this book at the end. But what I put on the page today is 10 steps closer to that end point. Mm-hmm. And so even if what I put on the page today isn't what end up liking, or it doesn't fit, that's fine, because I will have moved my mind forward enough to know why it wasn't right, why it didn't feel good, and either what I want to do to change it or what would be right instead.
And I'm going to write all this words.
Well, wisdom or just headstrong delusion, your choice.
I say it's wisdom. And when I'm going back through and editing this for YouTube, I'm going to write all these down, put them up on my computer.
Yeah.
How do you handle writer's block? Yeah.
Writer's block. Oh, man. Yeah, well, I dealt with it for like 40-something years. And then... haven't had as much trouble since then. For me, I have definitely had points where I got stuck, and no, I don't hate sounding this way. I'm going to sound this way because this is what I truly believe. Sometimes you need to be stuck for a bit, and that's fine. Be stuck. Figure out why you're stuck. Figure out what you need to be unstuck, or just go, I'm stuck right here. However, if being stuck is the thing that's frustrating you, you're in charge. You don't have to stay right there. Say, okay, I'm definitely at a dead end with this part. I know that I want to write this other part later. I'll just go try that. And so you are the only one who's going to stop you from writing. You're the only one who is going to stop you from thinking that your ideas are worth or not worth putting down. And once you get over those parts, yeah, not everything I write is great. There are sentences in my published book that I'm like, ooh, but I got stronger. The second book, I'm finding less of those. And so I do think it's like anything, if you're scared to ride a bike because you're scared of falling, after you've fallen once, you're a lot less scared.
Yeah, it's not as bad as you thought it was.
Right. Well, but it's also because you know what to do. You know how to get up. It's the fear of not knowing how to get up that keeps you from moving in the first place. You're going to fall. You're going to falter. You're going to have mistakes. That there is no way around that. So if you want to let that keep you from doing it, or don't.
It's like in my book that I'm writing, I completely skipped chapter 11. I wrote all the way up to chapter 10, and then I went to 12 and 13 because I knew in chapter 11, like my character had been fighting with her dad, and in chapter 11, she was going to make up with him. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know how to make her do that because I just didn't know what to do to make her. Mm-hmm. He was going to apologize or she was going to apologize. I didn't know how to do it. So I just skipped it and then went to the next chapter where they're already made up. I still have not gone back to write it.
Well, and what if you don't need it? Or what if it comes as a flashback at the very end? Because as a reader, I'm interested to know what happened there, but maybe the actions that the character takes on the other side of it tell me without having seen that scene.
Could do that too. You might just skip me. You might just save me from writing an entire chapter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's also again where the developmental edit that I got on Called made such a difference in terms of helping to pace out a few parts of the story. And there was a chapter, a fairly long chapter near the end, and she made a really concerted recommendation of splitting it in half so that we get a little bit of it up front and then the weight of it comes later. So that thing that you've come to chapter, you've got 1 through 10 and then 12 onward, maybe there's something about assuming that 11 was the right point for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But who knows? It's also really easy to change the numbers. Just make sure they're sequential when you publish.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I skipped a chapter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, you never know. Those automatic numbering lists are really dangerous in Word.
No, I do it myself. So
Perfect.
How do you develop your plot and characters?
Sure.
Do you use a certain plotting method or?
Yeah. So remember earlier when I said I think I might do it wrong? Yeah. I have, when I sat down to write Called, I knew the climax and I knew 4 of the actions that were going to happen, but the rest of it came up in the writing. And I don't know how else to explain it other than I have been writing and all of a sudden someone introduces themselves to the story and tells me why they're there and what they need to do. And it's always a really good idea, but I often sit down with a very faint idea of where we're going and things pop up. So I don't know. Luck?
No plot structure or anything, you just write it.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
My alarm went off.
What time to get up? No, I know what we're reaching for climactically, so everything is striving towards that arc. But like the subplot is something I often figure out along the way. And there are, like you said, there are moments where, so in the second book, I'm going to try really hard not to give any spoilers. There's really no spoilers that I could give, but a character is trying to make a very important decision that sort of decides, which path from the fork in the road to go down. And I didn't know what they were going to choose for the longest time. And then all of a sudden, I was writing a different chapter, and one of the actions that character would have had to have made appeared. And I was like, well, there's the choice made. So some of the times, for me anyway, if I had waited until I had the story perfectly plotted out structurally in an outline form, I don't know that I would have gotten the story done, because there were parts of it that I had to discover in the writing of it. And again, I could have used that as a block to keep me from just writing. Now, does that work for everybody? No. And again, I'd had a good year and a half of walking and thinking through the exact same story points, and what about this, and how would that work? And so I had been doing a lot of brainstorming. It just wasn't anything I recorded as like, okay, this is where it starts, and then this and this and that. So it was much more vague. But again, I had done a lot of that world building, envisioning. So I had lots of details that I could use to sort of start playing around and get somewhere.
I did that for a while. I just sat down and just started writing. I didn't think about plot structures and stuff. And I got about 5 chapters in, and then I was like, oh, wait, what do I do now?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I definitely had some of those moments for sure. And like I said, that's where the second book was easier, because the first book, it was, you're still in that, like, I'm building a train. I have to put the track. I have to put the next piece of the track, and then this car and this car and this car. And when I was doing the second one, I was like, all right, there's going to be track, there's going to be cars, and we'll figure out how to put it all together once we get going.
That's like, I mean, everybody writes differently. It's
For sure.
To see the differences. How some people, they have to have a whole thing plot lined up, almost complete their book before they start writing their book.
Yeah.
And some people are like, okay, I just know that at the end this needs to happen, so I'm going to start here, and we'll get there somehow.
Yeah. So, my background in the theater actually occurs to me here. There's, and I'm gonna totally forget. It's a dramatic analysis technique called structural analysis. And what you do in structural analysis is you pick apart all the elements of a play. They recommend wholeheartedly starting at the end and reading it backwards, because in a play especially, when things happen in front of the audience is critical. And so reading a play backwards, after you've read it forwards, you read it forwards, then you read it backwards, you can better see those moments of when things happen. And then the other thing you do with structural analysis is, once you have all of the scenes and structure like annotated and figured out in your mind, you then assign what is called a unifying principle, which is a simple sentence, something like, for example, the music, or what is it? If the heartbeat music of love play on, it's a Shakespeare quote, and I'm totally butchering it, but it's a simple sentence that you can use to then, everything in that story is meant to make you think about that unifying principle. So for Called, it is about learning to listen to your unconscious voice more consciously. And so what I did is I wanted to build a world and a story that allowed me to explore that concept. And so everything in the story serves that concept of listening, learning, and trusting that voice in your head.
I like that. So,
I'm going to have to look up that Shakespeare quote now. It's going to bother me all day.
this is a great thing about Google. Like if you want to know something, you can just instantly know it. It's great.
I know. I remember being a child and like, actually having leather-bound Encyclopedia Britannicas.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have learned nearly as much.
You just couldn't. It just bugged you all day because there was no.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Or you had to like call the library.
Yeah. You already said how long it took you basically to write your called.
Yeah.
And your second one is at the editor now?
At the editor. Yes. Taught, the second volume in the story is I started it. I wrote the first chapter right after I sent the that draft off to the developmental editor. So I started it last December, and I sat down and I wrote the first chapter, the dreaded plot recap chapter. So I sat down and I wrote that just so that I was like, okay, mark in the sand. And then I finished Called and I went back and I wrote Taught. I think I probably started in May and I sent it off to the editor at the end of September.
Okay, so that was...
Yeah, like 4 months of, and I took a few days off, but it was mostly, afternoons, stolen bits of afternoons and weekends.
That's a challenge. I don't know if I could do.
Yeah. Well, this one. Yeah, that's the thing. The creative monster in me when I was writing the first one and writing the second one, like there are times where sleep comes real easy, and there are other times where it's like, oh no, I'm up because I'm gonna have to go serve these voices in my head. Mm-hmm. But also it becomes a bit like I don't know, like when you sit too long and you got to stand up and stretch. If I went too long without working on this story, it was just increasingly all I was thinking about, and so I had to get some of it out of me. But yeah, the second one really fell out a lot faster. Yeah. Again, once you're out of your own way and you've stopped telling yourself that you can't, it's pretty cool what you can do.
I think once you get one, you get the itch, and you just got to do another one. It's like a tattoo.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like, and the first one finished, and now the second one, yeah, okay. And believe me, you asked earlier about writer's block. I'm like, why am I not at the point where I know what to do with book 3 yet? But I don't know. Eventually I will.
When you get that one back, then you'll figure it out, right?
Yep. Yeah. As soon as I've got a hint on where this one's finishing, then I can start on the next one.
So do you have like a set number of books that this is going to be? Like, is it going to be a trilogy or? Yeah,
I go back and forth. Because I'm like, I could do 150 of them. No, I'm torn between 5 and 7, to be very honest. I think 5 feels probably good, just because I start to get excited about telling stories that might take place in other places at some point. And if I would struggle to like write a standalone that's completely different. So I'm going to keep on this one for at least a couple more books, and then we'll see. But stylistically, I am also interested in branching out, because the dystopian sci-fi setting was really appropriate for what I wanted to talk about in this series, but I have a feeling it won't be the right style for some of the other stories that I want to tell.
Gotcha. So you're going to keep writing this series until you get sick of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously I'm going to keep writing it till good wins. I mean, not to spoil the ending, but
no point in reading those now. We know.
Yeah, exactly. You heard it here, folks.
So, do you try to do a set number of words a day when you write, or you just stop when you feel like stopping?
Yeah, I've had days where I'm like, all right, I want to, and especially when the word count on the manuscript is approaching a certain threshold, I'm like, all right, we're gonna try to get there. But no, I don't sit down and say, I'm gonna try to get 1,000 words. I generally have more of a like. I have to exercise this particular little story demon that has come up. Because again, those early writing sessions, those hour and a half long bucket filling sessions, those are so different from the fine tuning and the reading and adding and fleshing out sessions that you do later. And so, for those especially, because I generally will feel like, okay, if I have solid foundation for each chapter, then the fleshing out stuff, we'll see where it ends up. So yeah, I'm usually more interested in trying to solve a particular problem or get to a certain plot point before I end that session. Or some days it's just as many spelling mistakes as you can fix in this chapter in the next 20 minutes. Go.
I like how you said exercise the particular story demon. That's great.
Well, like sometimes there's just this. I keep thinking about this moment where they're standing there and this is happening, and I haven't captured what I want. And yeah, if I can get that feeling to go away, then that's a successful day.
That's awesome. What do you like to do when you're not writing?
I really love to cook. I find it so relaxing and meditative. As I'm sorry to say that I've come to enjoy exercise, so I do enjoy running now, which is just weird to admit. And for quite a while, I've also been running a music blog, so the K Tim Mixtape Club, where I do monthly playlists that just publish out. And what else? Oh yeah, I mean, I have that day job, 2 cats, and I try to be a responsible husband and uncle.
Is a day job something that you actually like to do?
Yes. I work in education, educational technology, so it's been enjoyable. It's there might be something I feel more personally invested in at the moment, but yes, it is a good job doing something that does benefit a lot of people, and I have great fortune to have that position for sure.
Good.
Yeah. But no, I want to be a wealthy independent writer that owns an island, obviously. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we're dreaming, right?
I tell everybody that my answer to that question makes me sound like a grandma. I like to cook and crochet and
Nice.
sew.
I used to do cross stitch, count and cross stitch, and actually my career in the theater was in wardrobe. So yeah, definitely done a lot of needlework.
It's relaxing. You just sit there and you fiddle with these little things and you.
Yes. Oh, and it's so beautiful to give those handmade gifts, and I do enjoy it. I ended up having some shoulder problems, so that irritated me with sitting and stitching for too long.
Have you go through phases of obsessively crocheting and haven't touched it? I do that too.
Yeah.
I obsess on things. I will buy a whole bunch of accessories for one craft and then do that craft religiously for like a month.
Mm-hmm.
And then not touch it again for like a year.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, the trouble with my having been so I have 5 nieces and nephews, and I did it for the first one, so I had to do it for all the others. But I cross stitched like a birth record because I had one made for me when I was a baby, and I remember growing up and looking at it and loving it. So I made those. But then, of course, everybody knew that I did that. So yeah, I got a lot of cross stitch gifts. I'm like, oh, cool, all these supplies.
And you're not gonna touch it again for a while.
Fat thumbs, I guess. Sorry about that.
Wasn't too much of an interruption. My next question would be, Which I know your book hasn't been out for very long, but have you
Mhm.
had any like super amazing reviews like that you just like?
Yeah, I mean, I do have a really exciting one on Amazon. Um, it just begins with speculative fiction at its finest, which, come on, who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
It's a slow roll getting reviews because again, that's the part. We've spent most of this time talking about the writing process. Selling a book is a totally different game, and one that I definitely did not have any practice in.
Yeah, and then even if you do sell it, like most people, I think just either forget to leave a review or just don't even think about doing it. They got the book, they read it, oh great, okay, and put it
Yeah.
aside. And
Well, and it's yes, I've purchased many a thing and never done a review. I I feel bad now, but yeah, it's funny. So I've had some good reviews, but I also have been inundated with requests to pay for reviews. Which I'm like, oh no, how about you pay for the book?
yeah,
And then I'll gladly listen to your opinion.
there's
Uh,
gonna be somebody out there trying to ask you to pay for everything under the sun.
Literally, for sure. The other struggle I have sometimes with review is that I find a lot of them end up being more on the book report than like the let's talk about the ideas in this text. If that makes sense, or a little bit more on the like story summary side and less on the this author is talking about something. And so that always, I'm like, oh, come on, somebody notice the themes.
I mean, I could see like people not picking up on a theme in a book because sometimes they just read the book just for entertainment. They don't really care about what the theme is supposed to be.
True, but oh man, but I thought so much about it. How can they not?
Unless you explicitly state in the beginning, this book is about.
Yeah. Well, that's what I put on the back, actually. So I mentioned at the beginning, I forgot to put a synopsis, but I didn't know what to put on the back. And yeah, I've looked at books all my life and have always read the synopses, but totally forgotten that moment. So instead, I put the first two reviews that I got, which are one is from Microsoft Word, and it says, "This may be offensive to your readers," because it was commenting on some of the language in the book, where he just says damn. It's just damn. It's not that bad. There are way worse words. And then when I first sent a copy of it to my husband, Google said, this attachment may be dangerous. So I thought this will be offensive and dangerous sounded like a really good recommendation on the back of the book. So that's what it says on the back of my book, that this will probably offend you and it's potentially dangerous. So
That's hilarious.
yeah, well, again, the more you know. I will put a synopsis on the next one. I really will.
I mean, you could always just redo the cover if you really wanted to.
Oh yeah, I know. But represents where I was right then.
I would be confused as to why that was there if you hadn't told me, but now that I know that's
Yeah, now I know why a lot of people turn it over and go, huh?
maybe this isn't for me.
Yeah, I know. Well, whoops. All right. Well, like we said, the good stuff's inside. If you want to know what's in the book, open it.
That's what you should see on the back of the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe that actually I will totally put that on the back of my next book. It would be a great follow-up. It says, interested to learn what's inside, turn it over and open it up. Yeah, done deal.
Write that down.
Yeah. Hold me accountable. This is on a recorded line. No, I think that's hysterical because again, why not do these things? Why do these things if they don't bring you a little joy? in my book, one of the characters, he's an executive with the conglomerate, and he has as an executive might, a very prestigious suite. And when I was like, all right, what's his suite number? And for no reason other than it tickled me, he's in suite 16.
16?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say another number that had a 6 in it.
No, suite 16.
Okay.
Because again, it just made me laugh. And I've had one reader be like, is that supposed to be funny? And I was like, if you think so, I think it's hysterical. But I have a weird sense of humor.
It's supposed to be funny if you find it funny.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how do you choose the names for your characters?
Great question. Well, so my main character Clementine, that name is very, very deliberate, because I needed one that was easily abbreviable. So Clem. And for some of the others, I bumble around, stumble around. There's some vaguely biblical allusions in the story, so I had a little bit of help with directions I could go. But I also, it's really important to me that the story portrays a more global representation. So I did spend some time working with generative AI to understand how different cultures form names and common syllable and vowel patterns that might tie names to different cultures just kind of subconsciously, to allow me to have characters that represent more than, say, the traditional white American names. And I played around with a lot of different choices, but ultimately most of them are names that are not too out of the ordinary. I hope. I did pick one imaginary name that I found in a video game, though. I just liked it.
What name was that?
Her name is Jumaline, or Jumaline, depending on your particular vowel stress.
That's cool.
Yeah. Jumaline Chakravarti. She is a doctor, and she works in the conglomerate research labs. She evaluates DNA evidence. Look out.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna need to do that. Looking up names based like vowel and syllable patterns based on where people live. That's interesting.
Well, I it's also like I just didn't know some of those things and how to find answers to those questions. Because again, you can look up like lists of common names, but it was like if I want a name to feel like it comes from the Indian subcontinent, what are vowel and consonant patterns, or how are those names constructed? In the second book, there are some characters that I distinctly wanted to have African origin names, and so again I did that same process to try to figure out how I could keep them original and create them myself, but have them feel or ground you in a specific culture.
That's brilliant.
Well, we'll see. Read it and tell me if you still think so. But I like to think so. I mean, I tried to do it. As with anything, I'm sure some will go, no, these are terrible. But I also
Those are not authentic African names. Well, I know it's because it's not on Earth, right?
exactly. But I definitely have gone back and forth with names, and like I said earlier, occasionally you make a new character because you forget. But that is where find and replace comes in super handy. Yeah,
that's definitely my best friend.
I know. I mean, you get real good at finding ways to sneak things through your editing process.
Like that video that I made where you figure out how to get rid of your filter words.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then there's those days where, again, going back to that question of like, if you're trying to hit a word count, filter words are your friend. Use them up. Get in there. You know what I mean? So sometimes that's all. I find word count to be a tricky metric because it's like, well, yeah, I can write way more words. I can also be more concise, direct, and illusory so that the reader is moving more rapidly. But that's a delicate balance, isn't it?
It's like sometimes quality over quantity is what you want, but other times I want more words on the page.
Well, right, which is why I go with I'm advocating hard for the drafting strategy of dump as much as you possibly can and clean it up later because you with a haircut you can't put on hair once it's come off the head. But as long as there's a bunch of hair to start with, and you work slowly, you can get there.
Mm-hmm. So what do you call the genre of your books?
Great question. Yeah, I think it's dystopian science fiction. Yeah, but I'm also learning okay, so hi, noob alert. When I started writing this book, I thought, oh, it's YA. Because it's appropriate for young audiences. I did not realize that young adult and the main characters are young adult and we stick mostly with their point of view and we don't switch and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, so it's not that at all. But so one of the things that is prevalent in the book is embedded neural technology. So most of the people who work for the conglomerate end up plugging into conglomerate servers via a port in the back of their neck. So it's definitely on the sci-fi side, but again, that is a very particular device in the story about whose voices are thinking in your mind. So it's not that I wanted to necessarily write in that genre. Dystopia is going to be really interesting to sell right now. But it was more that was like the right genre in which to set this particular story.
Whether to put something as YA or adult or NA, that's one thing that really I struggle with mine because I don't think it's YA technically. Mm-hmm. I would say maybe NA, but NA is not actually a very popular.
Yep.
People say it's growing in popularity, but still it's not very popular. Then if you do adult, a lot of people expect it to be adult,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm like, I am not going to end up satisfying people who are after romance because I don't write some of the same stuff that would categorize that genre. So yeah, it's really interesting when the preconceptions that come with genre, because I know when I told people I wrote a science fiction, I don't read a lot of science fiction. I'm like, okay, did you read The Hunger Games? Yeah. Did you read Ready Player One? Yeah. You've read science fiction. They just aren't necessarily sold that way. So yeah, genre is such an interesting part of the game too, because some of them inspire people and some of them turn people off, even though ideally they all appeal.
It's like trying to categorize your artwork and there's 4 categories.
Yeah. Well, or even sorting your books, Do you put contemporary fiction next to classic fiction? Do you mix and mingle? Do you put non-fic with fic? I am unfortunately, I have all of my drama books, all of my foreign drama books, all of my novels. I tend to have sections of my little library, but
that's the easy thing about mine. All of mine are pretty much the same.
Dig it.
I read a very specific kind of book.
Nothing wrong with that. I read all over the map, but I definitely I find, especially when I was going through my list of reads to try to come up with interesting things to talk about on the internet, I was like, wow, I read a lot of kind of flimsy mysteries. Huh, that's a thing I didn't realize about me, but sounds right.
whimsy mysteries?
Well, so for example, last year I revisited a mystery series that I read when I started reading them, I think, when I was 12, because my grandma gave me one. And it's the Cat Who mysteries. They're by Lillian Jackson Braun. The Cat Who blank, the cat who smelled a rat, the cat who came for breakfast, there's 30 something of them. And they're really cute little mysteries. It's actually a really fascinating story. So Lillian Jackson Braun wrote the first 3 novels in the Cat Who series as they were set in the early 80s and or late 70s, and the character was living in the city and got this cat. She wrote the first 2 or 3 and then stopped writing altogether for 30 years, raised her family, did her life, and then came back and wrote the next book in the series that picked up immediately after where she had left off. But the character gets a huge inheritance, moves into a very isolated northern woodsy type community, and then proceeds to, of course, like Jessica Fletcher or anyone else, find that there are murderers all around. But a really fun series where there's a Siamese cat that has this preternatural ability to help find the culprit. And yeah, so the Cat Who mysteries, they're certainly not challenging literature, but they're fun, silly, and, a little intrigue, light enough. I am a troublesome sleeper, so I have found that I can't be really invested in something before bed. And so those little mysteries where I'm like, I sincerely doubt that the main character is going to die. All right, I can go to sleep.
I was reading till I think 3 a.m. a couple of nights ago.
Yeah, well, and there are those nights where you have to, you just can't not keep going. But I definitely had to be careful about the kind of books I was trying to wind down with, because then there's also that part of my brain that would be like, if I was getting towards the end of the story, my dreams were just my brain trying to finish it, and believe me, the way more messed up versions of the endings.
I actually listen to audiobook as I'm falling asleep, and I've set a sleep timer on it so that it doesn't play the entire book while I'm asleep.
Right. Wake up to the and the end.
And yeah. I fall asleep to that because a lot of people can fall asleep to watching TV, but I can't, because when you're watching TV, you have to watch it. Your eyes are open. But if you're listening to audiobook, you can close your eyes and listen to it, and it makes me fall asleep.
Yep. I think the only TV I can do to fall asleep is like something I've seen 100 times. Like I could put on Snow White or something like that and it'd be fine. But yeah, I don't think I've seen the end of The Princess Bride in probably 20 years. I've always fall asleep during that movie. It's that comforting. It's that comforting, though. I mean, I could finish the movie out loud while unconscious. I've seen it so much. I love that film, but it's like a safe space, It's like, oh, cozy, I can go to sleep.
That is definitely in my top 5 favorite movies of all time.
Have you ever read the book?
No, and I really need to. I have the board game.
Oh, the book is so interesting because in the movie, the plot device is the grandpa is reading you the story. In the book, the plot device is the author has translated this fairy tale and is cutting out all of the boring parts. So there's like these break-in sections where it's like the preceding or the following 30 pages go on to discuss her packing for the trip. It involves a discussion of dresses, hats, gloves, shoes, trunks, wardrobes, and eggs. I am saving you so much time by cutting it. And so it's really cute and winky in terms of how it's playing with storytelling because the narrator knows that you're reading a story. Really interesting.
I need to get that.
Yeah. It's called, the official title is The Princess Bride, the Good Parts version, because the idea is that the full version by the S. Morgenstern is full of good and bad parts.
The part that skips the kissing scenes, right?
Yeah.
That wants you to. Who's your favorite secondary character in your book?
Jumaline, for sure. Jumaline has the most similarities with me in terms of just kind of realizing that, like, oh, hey, rigid control and rules aren't always the best ways for pursuing happiness. So, like I said, she's a genetic investigator who works in the conglomerate labs, and the conglomerate labs are, of course, part of their policing and crime prevention and all that. And as she gets assigned this new case, she starts to see evidence that is impossible, things that just can't possibly be true, and yet they are recorded as the evidence. And so she is struggling a bit with, okay, or if these things aren't true, but that's not possible, then my understanding of the truth is wrong.
So, in order to do like a character that is like a geneticist and like dealing with DNA and stuff, did you look up a whole bunch of stuff on that so that you got it all right, or?
A little. I also, because I was working in, a new society, I did do some distillation of genetics because I don't want to be wrong. I will also, before we go, I will read you the copyright statement from my book because it's a very important one. It relates to that topic. So I distilled down to, in the conglomerate world, they are only tracking a core 16 genetic traits. Then they use those to classify people into these different groups and such. So I kind of bent the rules a little bit in terms of I narrowed it to a point where I could conceivably talk about it. But the copyright statement of my book says that this is a work of fantasy dreamt up of as I was trying to make sense of the way the world is falling apart. Any reference to person, places, or things, or even reality is purely coincidental. And then the last sentence, any bad science or impossible technology is entirely my error and wholly possible in the context of the story. A bold disclaimer that just says, if it's wrong, no, it isn't. You're wrong. I'm right. It's fine.
That's why you write stories that don't take place on Earth, because everything is right because you said so.
Exactly. I decided, so that's how it works. But that is how, and I have a video ready to go for this where I'm talking a little bit about working with generative AI. I did work with generative AI, not to write the text of the book, but in some of those circumstances, because you could ask it questions like, if I were trying to understand 16 different suspects and how their genetic traits lined up, what are some of the factors I would consider, what are some of the details I would need to know, what are some of the et cetera, and that let the AI scrape information from our world and present it to me as sort of a concise research blurb on exactly what I wanted, as opposed to just reading all about the actual, theory of genetics and all that stuff. So it's a really helpful tool. It's a really helpful tool for me in that way because I could ask it those, if I have, in the second book, there's a train that runs on electromagnets. I don't know nothing about that. So I definitely had to ask AI. I was like, okay, if I have a train that's using electromagnetic propulsion and it needs to go up a hill, explain to me how the physics of that might work. And that it explained in a dry and boring way how the physics of that would work, which then I used to come up with, okay, I'm a person in the room and I am hearing those things happen. I can describe how they happen. I can describe the, increase in air pressure, that they feel it in their ears. And it let me narrate something that I do not understand from a physics perspective in a way that I hope sounds informed and makes sense.
I never thought about using AI in that way, just to explain something to you that took you forever to research.
Right. Because again, if you're going and if all you have is the Encyclopedia Britannica, it's a lot harder to figure out how someone might use some of those things. But generative AI, if you're asking it, if I were a geneticist trying to ascertain this, what are the tests I would conduct? What are the supplies I would have? And it can tell you those things. And then your job as the writer is to go, okay, great. Now I have a really thorough picture in my mind of what is around this person, what they're going to do, what those actions look like. And I'm not going to use what the AI said verbatim, but it is definitely going to be part of the scene that you envision because
You can explain it in your own words. Yeah,
Right. Exactly.
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's been fun. There's also there's a trend of asking AI to tell you something you don't know about yourself, which very interesting. Yeah, I'll post my video later. I show what it said to me. It said very nice things about my creativity, so I was grateful to the robot overlord. But the other reason I'm talking about AI a lot is also because there are 2 artificial intelligence characters in the book. So part of the conglomerate's, safety and security operation is a surveillance system. And that surveillance system is run by an algorithm that the different people talk to. Because just like you would ask Alexa a question, they ask Iris a question in the story. So, I know one of the questions you asked was feedback from readers. And that was actually something I got from one of my early readers was they were like, it's really boring watching these people work with computers. And that's what clicked it for me. I was like, but what if they talked to them instead? So instead of, he asked the computer to do this. Hey, Iris, I need to know this. So it was a sneaky way of then really giving a lot more action and dialogue to these sequences where the character is essentially using a computer.
Okay, it's a good way to take somebody's criticism and make it work.
Yeah. Well, again, I early on, it was rough. It was a bumpy story. I didn't know what I was doing, and putting it in front of a few people to get some of that feedback of like, you lost me here. I don't know where you're going.
How do you, when you are dealing with your edits and fixing things when the editor gives it back to you and everything, how do you just finally be like, okay, it's done?
I know, right? Yeah, I've thought about this a lot because was trying to figure it out the first time. So as I may have alluded to, the storytelling that I started doing was for me personally. I needed the story, and then I was writing, and the writing was an activity that was bringing me a lot of satisfaction and enjoyment. So I needed this story. I needed it, and it was just mine, and I needed to spend time with it. But after I had spent that time, there did come a point where I was like, I'm ready to let this go to others. While it was just mine, yes, I shared it with a few people and I got editors and things involved, but it was mine. I was the gatekeeper of it. And as with anything, there's a line in the book that I think summarizes this. The funny thing about confidence is you don't have it until you do. And there just came a day where I was like, okay, yep, I'm done. I'm done holding this to just me. And it's scary for sure. And, instantly I was like, oh my God, but I could still change 10 things. And I still could today. There's a spelling mistake and a handful of typos, but nothing's perfect. And perfect is the enemy of any completion at all. Because if I waited for it to be perfect, I'd still be waiting. I'm not perfect, it turns out. So, but for me, again, it was it's not like raising a child because there doesn't come a point where you're like, get out. But, much more like being the child. There comes a point where you're ready to leave home, or you're ready to move away from the state, or whatever it is that those kind of decisions. And when you're not ready until you are. And so it's really hard to say that there's a calculated way to decide when you're ready, because it's a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And the feeling was I didn't want to keep it secret to me anymore. I wanted to share it with others. I was ready for others to get in there.
So your second one, when you get it back from the editor and you like
Yeah.
go through all their notes and everything, do you send it back to them again to have them look at it again, or are you just like, I fixed what you said, okay, now it's done?
No. So I worked with two editors. So I had a developmental edit, and then I sent it to a copy editor. And if you want a sobering lesson in what a copy editor does and just how helpful they can be, read the track changes version when you get it back from a copy editor. Because I started reading the clean one and I was like, man, this looks great. I don't think she did anything. And then I read that one and I was like, oh my God, she rewrote half of this so wonderfully. And she didn't rewrite it, but you know what I mean? Like it was just moving things around and readjusting sentences so that they flowed better. So between the developmental edit that was just, here are the big story points or things that you might want to consider tension, structure, and character development wise, and then the copy edit came back with a lot more, okay, this is all tighter, cleaner, neater. And then I did a round of, she also was very sweet and left a few comments. So I did a round of addressing those. Word to the wise, the minute you get it back from your copy editor, keep track changes on for the rest of your life. Never take track changes off that document again, because especially once you are approaching publication time, oh my God, I accidentally removed something and forgot it. Yeah, don't do it. It's dangerous.
Good to know.
Yeah. So the second one, I spent 4 months cranking it out. I will get it back from the editor here in about a week, and then my intent is to send it to copy editing in January, so that hopefully I can be releasing it in April. I'm really stuck on what to do on a cover. We figured out the back, but I got to figure out the front cover now. So,
Do you do your covers, or do you have someone?
I would love to find someone. I've found a couple people on this app who I might reach out to and talk to. I actually did the cover for Called, and that is not because I wanted to. I worked with a company called Book Baby to do the publication and setup of the book, and as part of that, I did get a cover design. And from the synopsis and everything, they gave me a cover design where the main character was clearly white. And the main character is clearly not white in the story. So I was like, well, we're going to make some changes. And so that's how we ended up with the cover we did. But I do some digital artwork in my free time. So that was coloring on my iPad is so much fun. But I had fun doing that. But yeah, I would love to have someone work with me on the second book cover, because I'm also now going, well, it has to kind of feel like it belongs next to the first one too, because don't you hate that when a series, like when you get the wrong editions of your series and then they don't line up and look nice together on the wall?
Yeah, one thing that really gets on my nerves, and I will show you, is I have this series, it's a 7-book series, and I lost the first book. I ordered the first book again on Amazon, and
no, yeah, that's criminal.
this is annoying. It's really annoying.
Yes, because forever, if you yes, oh my gosh, maddening.
All the other ones are this little size, and then I got the first one in, and it was huge.
You're like, I didn't order large print, did I? I love it.
I think, well, because the small ones I got at Barnes and Noble, and then I didn't know I needed to go back to Barnes and Noble to get the same size book, so I ordered the next one on Amazon.
Yeah, you'd think. Yeah.
Well, I think that was all the questions I had for you.
This has been so much fun, Michelle. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversation and the chance.
Do you want to explain your book again, since the people that were here the first time said it's probably not here anymore?
Yeah, so Called is a dystopian science fiction thrilling adventure. It's a little Hunger Games, a little Ready Player One, whole lot of thrills, twists, and turns. Tells the story of Clementine Jones, a citizen of the conglomerate government who discovers that the world around her is not quite what it seemed, and she is going to be responsible for changing it.
And I'll just plug mine in here real quick. I have my story building notebook that I created to help authors come up with their plot and their characters, and it asks questions and helps you just figure out your world. And
I love it.
so it's on Amazon. Where can we buy yours? Is it just on Amazon, or are you everywhere? Or
I'm in all the places. There's a link on my profile where you can save 10% using the code BookTalk. It is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, Kobo, tons of different retailers. But print, your best bet is Amazon or through my profile. Ebook. I'm more partial to ebooks personally, which I realize is like a cardinal sin on Book Talk because I have nothing to show in my background. But I tend to trade in ebooks just because a little easier for me to carry around.
you do have physical books of your books, though, right?
Oh yes.
Something
Physical
you can
copies. Oh yeah, I do. That's true. Yeah, but I've given away most of my copies. I've still got like 3 or 4 around here. I went around. I took a few of my author copies and I went around to all of the little lending libraries in the neighborhood and stuffed copies in.
Works. But yeah, you
Yeah.
need to designate a few of them just to be like, okay, these are my shelf books.
Right. Yes. Well, I have one where I broke the spine properly so that I could flip it open and use it as a prop in all the videos. And I won't try to make someone else own that.
All right, well, I'll get off of here and I'll talk to you later. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.